tear, it falls and hits the ground. A tree, it falls without a sound. A bird, it calls and sends you home. A man, he sits in the cold all alone.
Hi Emma, welcome to the Joy of Sunflowers. Thank you so much for joining me. Please introduce yourself a little bit more.
Hi Ella. I'm Emma. I am 37, just turned actually a month ago. I'm from Manchester in the UK. Currently don't live in Manchester in the UK. Live in Bowmanville, which is just outside Toronto. We've been here for 4 years, and we moved just prior to the pandemic, which has been an experience. Have a husband, Dan. We've been together for 14 years this year, married for 11 this year. We have a little dog called Casper, and we have an angel baby, Avery, as well.
So, gosh, you've gone from Manchester to Canada. That's amazing. I went from England to Australia.
I did wonder, there was an accent.
Oh, I know about moving. But it's an extreme thing, isn't it, when you move from like
very extreme.
And it's so different.
Yeah.
Love it. No, I like just from that little bit talking to you before, like it sounded, I was like, you're English. Where are you from? Like it sounded northern. I'm like, I don't know whereabouts because I haven't lived there in so long. Like I have no idea.
And it's funny, isn't it? Pinpointing the accents. People don't quite believe it, how different accents can be within like a 30-minute radius. It's like crazy, really.
Yeah, it's just like you just don't know. Like you hear someone's accent and you're like, right, well, you're definitely English and you're definitely from like north or like south or
Yeah, you can kind of pinpoint a region, but then it gets a bit convoluted sometimes.
Yeah.
My husband's from Leicester, so his accent's completely different. So it's always very interesting when we go out together and people are like, are you both from England? He sounds a bit, it's very strange.
Yeah. So with your dog, did you take him from England or did you get him in? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he appreciated it at all. It was probably the most traumatic 24 hours of his life. But yeah, he moved with us. We couldn't really leave. Well, I couldn't leave him, although there was elements of bribery going on between my dad trying to keep him with them and then my husband's parents trying to keep him with them. It was very interesting. But no, we made the trip. Yeah. And at some point we'll probably be moving back, so he's going to make the return trip as well.
Bless him.
So I know.
Well, hopefully it won't be as bad as the first trip because he's done it before.
You would think so, but he's actually the most terrified dog in the world. He's scared of brooms, brushes, vacuums. He's scared of any loud noises.
Yeah.
So, we really set him up to succeed on a plane flight, I believe.
My dog's like that, and he like backs out of the kitchen, and you're like, why are you doing that? It's not like I beat you or anything. Like this looks so bad. Like
we call our vacuum Vlad the vacuum just because it's perilous, isn't it? It's a perilous name, and oh gosh, he's terrified. Even if he's sat on the couch, he will move off the couch because the vacuum's there. It's like it can't fly. It's an intriguing dog, that's for sure.
No, it's like I don't understand why they do that. Like it's not like you haven't like hurt them, you haven't gone towards them with the vacuum, like and tried to terrify them with it. I don't understand why they do those things. I thought maybe I'd done something wrong, but it's nice to hear there's other dogs that have the same problem.
There's definitely other dogs, don't worry. We had a lovely like next door neighbor in England called Jack, and it was his birthday, and we bought him one of the Minion farting guns. So we were trying it out in the house beforehand, and he was terrified of that as well.
Oh, bless.
Which ultimately led to him now being terrified if anyone releases wind in the house. He just scabbers. So yeah, he definitely keeps us entertained.
Oh,
Definitely.
well, you know what? It's a good warning. It's a good warning. Okay. Whenever
Yeah.
someone farts, you're going to know now. And you're going to know when it's going to be really stinky. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
You don't see him for dust.
Oh, he's left the room. I'm going to go and do something like in another room now.
Yeah.
Someone's clearly farted. Imagine having a room of guests and your dog's like freaking out because like everyone.
Yeah. But, nah,
Um,
someone's let have some wind.
oh, it could be good, could be terrible, but that's okay. Um, so let's dive in and start from the very beginning. I asked this of many speakers. Was have you always wanted kids, or was it like a thing that kind of just happened that you met your husband and you're like, with you, yes.
Yeah. He'd love for me to say that, actually. Do you know what? I think, yeah, I have always wanted children. It wasn't really kind of at the forefront of my mind because I was very career orientated as well. So prior to moving to Canada, I was a high school teacher. And that was what I always wanted to do. I always wanted to work with children. And I think that was kind of an entry point to kind of think about being a mom and think about what that would entail. And so yeah, in answer to your question, I think that was always kind of on my path. My mum was very similar as well. Like my mum wasn't very career oriented. She always wanted to be a mum, and that kind of channeled her entire life. So I think I kind of got a little bit off her in that respect. But yeah, when I met Dan, yeah, he was like straight away, you kind of know if they're going to be kind of a good kind of parental figure, a great dad. And I've always kind of known that he would be a wonderful dad.
Gorgeous. There you go. He'll like that.
Yeah, you'll love that. It's all over it.
Why didn't you tell her it was all me?
It was all me. I saw him across the room, and the first thing I thought was, yeah, definitely you. You're the father of my children.
There's been a few who've said that, and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, nice.
I get it though. I get that kind of chemical kind of reaction. They say it is very chemical, isn't it?
Yeah.
Between man and woman, and yeah, a man and a man. Or
I mean, technically we all kind of have that because otherwise we wouldn't be with the partner we're with because we're like,
yeah,
you would make
yeah,
great material, you know.
yeah. And like it's funny because me and Dan always laugh. Like we were kind of always, we feel like we were always destined to be together. Like it's really unusual occurrence. Like we were looking through old family photos when we kind of first got together, and there was a lot of him from in Florida. I was like, oh, when did you go to Florida? And he was like, oh, we stayed in the Disney hotel, we stayed in this one. And it transpires that actually we were staying in the same Disney complex at the same time. We overlapped by a week. So he was 11 and I was 10. And we had to eat breakfast in the same area. So I'm absolutely positively sure that our paths probably crossed in some way, which is really kind of bizarre. But yeah, I think you're right. Like for some people, it really does feel almost like destined. It's kind of like that chemical draw of the person. But
That's
yeah,
cute.
very strange.
Yeah, that is weird,
Very,
but
very strange.
yeah, very cute. It's amazing how many things like happen within our lives that and then we still end up with the people we end up with. Like my husband,
Yeah.
he was set to move, and then his parents like didn't want to move, so then he stayed put. And like my parents wanted to move, and I said no, I'm not moving schools, and then that's where we met. We met
Wow.
in high
So
school.
yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because it's those little choices and
Yeah,
those little decisions that are made that kind of set you on that path to kind
yeah,
of find the person. I
yeah.
do think it's a thing. It's very Nora Ephron kind of film writing, kind of rom-com thing, but I do think in some circumstances there absolutely is that kind of, I don't know, what does Taylor Swift call it? That kind of golden thread that links us all almost.
Yeah. No, it's pretty
Yeah.
amazing. It's pretty amazing. there's like a 7-degree gap between each person or something, or 7 people gap. I don't know. I can't remember what it was, but it was like everyone, you could literally like tie everyone together by like the last 7 people
it's crazy, isn't it, really, when you think about it like that way.
Yeah, it was something weird. But I mean, I live in a place called Perth in Australia, and I can tell you, like, you get to know a lot of people. Like,
yeah,
it's hard to like go into like an area and not like see someone that you've like
it's
met.
very similar where I'm from in Earlham. Like, everybody knows everybody, so like ultimately we went back there to scatter our little girls' ashes a couple of weeks back, and we can guarantee that we'll walk into the local supermarket and we will see at least 2 people by the time we leave. And it was the same on this occasion. Like, our next door neighbor, who I spoke about earlier, was at the checkout at the same time with her children. And then as we walked away, my cousin's wife turned up with her 2 children. So yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah.
It's strange, isn't it?
Yeah, sometimes you want to see them, sometimes you don't, you know.
No, sometimes you don't, definitely. And sometimes you wish that you lived in a much bigger place. Yeah,
but you don't have a choice. So once they see you, you have to be like, hello.
Yeah.
Bye. I have things I have to do somewhere else, another
Oh,
conversation, because I might cry or I'm just not feeling up to it today.
yes. Oh, yeah. There's been plenty of times in my life when I've really not welcomed a supermarket or a grocery store visit. You're just like, not today, Satan. Move away. Oh dear.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
amazing how we can, you know, with all emotions associated with, you know, going through loss, going through fertility, you just kind of, yeah, like you can go through these real moments of, I don't want to see anybody. Like, I don't want to
Yeah.
talk to anybody. I don't want to see another face. Like, every face annoys me.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know what, that really resonates with me, because I kind of feel like that now. And we are so good at putting on a mask and wearing that mask and owning that mask. And I said this to 2 of my very good friends. I am my own worst enemy, because I know that I am totally masking it. I'm totally brave facing it. But the other option is to break. And when you don't see an end point to that break, it feels like a chasm's kind of opening, and you're going to get sucked in, and are you going to be able to claw yourself back out again? Because it's such a quick turnaround with fertility, and I don't think people really understand that. You go through a loss every month. Like, I was trying to explain that even a negative pregnancy test for someone who's trying to have a baby is a loss. And so if you've done it for so long and every month is that, and then you have to pick yourself back up again and start taking your meds again, or cope with, enforcing a period like I have to do, or, a natural period, and geeing yourself up mentally for what's coming the next month. I just think we're so great at being our own worst enemy and masking that to the world. And so people don't really understand the nuts and bolts that goes on with us when we're struggling.
No.
And I think that's a real challenge, because then they don't know how to treat you.
Yeah, and I think it's hard with when you have so many emotions as well, it's hard to know when to feel them and when not to. Like, I know a lot of people go, oh no, embrace your feelings, you have to feel what you have to feel. But then at the same time, if you're living that scenario, that thing that is actually causing the emotional just distraught feeling, you can't really necessarily allow yourself to feel it all the time, because it's a lot.
Yeah.
And if you're constantly going through it, you're right, there isn't an end in sight, unless you've decided, okay, this is the last time, like we're gonna do something else, and I think once you reach that point, that's when you can let everything in and deal with all of that and get through that. But before that point, like, I think I totally like understand, like, it, how can you allow all of that to just take over, because you know you're still living it, because you're still going for it, you're still driven. So yeah, like, I understand that accepting what you're feeling and everything, but I also understand that if you're living it and you know you're going to keep living it, you have to keep going, you know, as best you can, and not just take it all in and break. You're right.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we've had like very similar conversations that you were talking about that point where you're choosing to, I hate saying give up. Give up is the wrong word for
No, it's
this,
not
but it's
give
the one
up.
that we
Yeah.
kind of go naturally to. But it's like, call it a day. Just say, you know, enough's enough. My body's gone through it, and I'm ready for something different. I'm ready for a change, and we're kind of, because I mean, I'm sure we're going to get into kind of what's happened with us, but kind of the nature of what we're going through. We're here for in a finite amount of time before we move back home. And so within that, it's kind of, well, when is enough enough? When is it time for us to say, you know, yes, I want to be a mum. Yes, I want you to be a dad. But our lives are on hold. And it's very strange as someone that, you know, has been going through this for 12 years and seen all of her friends have children. And it's like, we've been kind of left behind. We've got great friends and we socialize with them and we spend a lot of time with their children. And, you know, I adore my friends' children more than anything. But it's like, they're all living the lives that we planned. And yet here we are. We've moved forward, but it's only snail's pace. It's only tiny little steps. We're still very much in the same place, still waiting for a new outcome.
Yeah.
While you see all of your friends around you buying better houses, better cars, getting those promotions at work, you know, having a second child, having a third child, having a fourth child. Like, our best friend, we always laughed and joked and said that our children will grow up together. And our godson, our best friend's child, is 10 years old this year. And it's like, they're getting to the point where he's independent now and he'll be going off and doing his own thing and they'll get their lives back to an extent. And we'll be still in the trenches, I call it, which is a very extreme thing to say because it's, you know, but sometimes it does feel like you're in the trenches trying to battle yourself out of it. It's very uncompromising position sometimes, being infertile.
Yeah. Well, again, you're still going through it. So let's start from where you guys made the decision to start trying and how you found out that you know were going to struggle.
So I always had an idea that I was going to struggle. I was 15 and my granddad passed away really suddenly. And from between, so my granddad passed away just before Christmas and a friend in our year group passed away at the end of February. And within that time, something happened and my period stopped happening. I didn't menstruate. And so we went to the doctors. Mum took me to the doctors and they put me on the pill. That was their answer. So I went on the pill at 15 and stayed on the pill until I was 24. So when me and Dan got together, I always kind of knew that there would be an issue. And I knew really that I had polycystic ovaries. I just knew it. I had hair growth and my hair was falling out and, you know, I gained weight, which wasn't just from the pill. So we had a very frank conversation. We got engaged very quickly after a year of being together. And I said to Dan, I think that I'm going to struggle, and this is why. So just prior to us getting married, I started the ball rolling on fertility treatment. Went for your annual, we call it a pap test in Canada, smear in England. Did that, and they found abnormal cells. And so for a long period of time, they were eradicating those abnormal cells. So it became a very long and drawn out process, really, for me, because I had to deal with these cells and have a colposcopy and things like that. And then once I got the all clear, it was like, right, okay, now's the time. And as you know, nothing happens. And, the tricky thing for me was that we did all the testing, and Dan had male factor infertility as well. So he had a low sperm count and low mobility as well, which was really tricky for him. That became really difficult for him to deal with, because nobody really talks about male problems. Nobody, because it's just a given in school that a man and woman will get together, they'll have sex, and they'll have a baby, and that's how it works. And nobody ever talks about the what ifs when you're younger. So, naturally males don't tend to share. So it was a real tough situation for Dan. But I think it helped us knowing that it wasn't just one of us. We both had an issue, and we were both going to deal with it. So we kind of went on the waiting list to speak to a specialist, and then we got to the specialist, and that for me was where the issues started happening, because National Health Service, they have very stringent methods on who's going to be allowed to have treatment and who isn't, and they run that off BMI and having polycystic ovaries. I'm never going to be stick thin, never. I had a BMI of, when I started, 38, and I needed to be at 30. So what would happen was I'd go to our specialist every four months, and he would weigh me. He would measure my height, and I would sit in that room, and he would tell me that I was too fat to be a mum. In his medical terms, you need to lose weight. We can't refer you until you're 30, 30 BMI. You would be a high risk pregnancy. It would be a danger for you to carry children. And then he would go, I'm going to give you metformin, take this, come back in 4 months. So 4 months would pass, and the same would happen over and over again.
That's awful.
So,
that's awful. Because there's so many people that have kids naturally, and they're like, I've seen heaps of people who are overweight, or even people who are obese have kids.
Yeah, have children. And that was a frustration for me and Dan, because ultimately you go out for a walk, you go to the shopping centre, you walk down the shopping centre, and I don't mean to be rude, because people are beautiful whatever size they are, but a lady that's 3 or 4 times the size of me has 5 children around her. And it's like, a BMI is not a measure of who you are as a person and who you're going to be as a mother. And they did offer me nutritionists and things like that. And my challenge was, because I was a teacher and I didn't have the confidence or the know-how to kind of say and advocate for myself at that point in my life. I never said, I need this time off, I need to go and see a nutritionist, I need to do that. So in the end, my solution to this was to go to Slimming World. So I joined a Slimming World club. I spent hours of my life meal prepping, planning, cutting out all of the sins and whatever. And I did that, and I did a Zumba class. I had a PT session. I was boot camping it 2 nights a week, as well as doing a full-time job, doing all the housework, looking after the dog, and, planning, because teaching's not just 8 till 3.
Yeah.
And I ended up just starving myself, if I'm honest. And even then, I didn't make it to the threshold. Even then, I was still at 31.5, and they
Because
wouldn't.
I mean, it's not weight. It's an actual like hormonal imbalance that causes, you know, because polycystic ovarian syndrome, like that, like, I mean, as far as I know, there's like hormone imbalance, there's all this other stuff as well. Like, so you put on weight. So it's not actually necessarily what you're eating. What you're eating can actually help, apparently, polycystic ovarian syndrome. I have heard that. I have had a few nutritionists on who have talked about how they've helped patients with their symptoms and everything, and helped them get pregnant. So, I mean, it's definitely something to look into, but yeah, like going on a weight loss thing, you know, it's not about weight. Yeah.
It didn't work. And if I'm honest with you, it made me bloody miserable.
Yeah, it would have.
Yeah, it made me miserable. And you know, you're absolutely right. Like, a weight loss diet isn't going to eradicate a hormonal imbalance. It's just not. It needs to be treated delicately with different supplements, with healthy exercise. And that wasn't really kind of offered in some respects, and it just became this ongoing cycle of, right, you're just too fat. And it got to 8 years down the line with one cycle of Clomid in the bank, and that was it. And Clomid was never going to work for me, as I've found out since I moved to Canada. Like, I just got gaslit, and that's the honest truth. And there are thousands of women in the UK right now who are going through the same. And as austerity continues to ramp up and funding leaves, there are thousands of couples in the UK at the minute who are never going to have the opportunity to have children. And it's just tragic, because I've been very blessed in our kind of financial situation that we were able to do something about it. But I know that not a lot of couples, especially at the moment, the way the world is, will be able to do something that we did. And ours was very extreme. Yeah, so that was kind of like the starting point for us, and that ongoing gaslighting, you know, never getting any further.
I still don't understand the weight thing, because like part of the issue, you know, creates weight. Like polycystic, like it's like I've heard that's one of the symptoms of having
absolutely.
that.
So yeah, what they're doing is they're just trying to battle symptoms rather than going for the root cause of it, and discovering more. And there wasn't that much research on polycystic ovarian syndrome, and so ultimately they're trying to cut costs because it's a national health service. And so it's a very easy red tape to deny someone their human right of being a parent. And so and also there's so much weight with such a pun, there's so much weight that's placed on body image, that when someone uses that as a weapon, it really, really kind of destabilizes you. So every 4 months for 8 years, you go back and you've not hit that marker, and you feel like a failure, and they treat you like you're a failure, and it becomes like it bleeds. It's like osmosis. It just bleeds into every other part of your life, to the point where your mental health is shot. You're not performing that well in your career because you're trying to meet this impossible threshold. So, and I'm really lucky that it didn't, for a time, it didn't impact our relationship. I think there was certain points where I became very difficult to live with, because I just closed myself off, and Dan didn't know how to reach me. And I think that was the point where the dog came into our lives. And that really helps. But I just threw myself into work, because it was like, I worked in inner city Manchester, and it wasn't all the case, but you attached yourself to these lovely young people who you had a responsibility to nurture and kind of provide aspirations to. And some children just came from very challenging households and or got themselves into very challenging situations. So it was very easy for me to latch my maternal emotions onto them. So I just took on more and more at work, and it became very, very mentally unhealthy.
Yeah. But you know what? I'm sure you've helped a lot of kids. Like, there's a thing, that there's something to be said about the schooling system. I'm not a big fan of school. I homeschool. But there were some good teachers, and you sound like one of them.
Thank you. I tried my best.
There were some
my best.
There were some really supportive teachers, and those teachers made the biggest difference to any child that was in their classroom. So, there is something to be said about that. Like you probably really did make a difference. And a lot of the time, like, kids are really suffering, and because you've seen it, and just having that one, because I remember one of my teachers in primary school, the one teacher who like just made my day. I remember her. Her name was Chris, but I remember her, and she actually made it like okay for me to be there. Like, I had a terrible time, but she made it okay. So you could very well be that one teacher for someone else.
I think I was, and you know what, I'm not kind of, I don't look at everything in rose-tinted glasses. I know school isn't for everyone, and a lot of pupils that I taught, school wasn't for them as well. But if you can provide a little shaft of light in a doorway for a child to prop their foot in the way and get it open, and it's just nice to see young people succeeding, especially when they've got so many barriers and obstacles put in front of them.
Exactly.
And I think it did help me. It did help me. I don't regret it.
No. And like I said, there's a lot of bad teachers out there too. So, but you sound like a good one, and that's what's important, because you actually care about the kids. So, that's really awesome. Okay, so you got the dog around that time. And we spoke a little bit before we started, and you said how, that really impacted you and just kind of helped you, get up out of bed and do something on the weekends when you weren't at work and you couldn't push yourself into work. So, okay, so let's go from there and then move to how you guys came to moving to Canada.
Yeah, I know. So Dan worked for a Canadian company, which did make life a little bit easier. I think we went through a spate of time where we didn't really talk to many people about what we were going through. It was there and people knew it was happening, but we didn't really go into kind of how we really kind of felt, how it was impacting us. And it just got to a point where we had the opportunity to move. And I'd done a little bit of research about, where I could go that would treat me that didn't have a BMI cap, or if it did have a BMI cap, one that was realistic for people. So Canada was one of the first countries that I saw, and I was kind of like, I've always kind of liked Canada. We went to visit, and we kind of loved the extremes of the weather, and so it was a no-brainer to start there because Dan could transfer, and luckily with my qualifications, we got permanent residency, so we fast-tracked. So it was a two-pronged kind of attack. Brexit had happened in the UK. I'd started to burn out at work. I just couldn't do it anymore, and not because I don't think it was solely because of the job. I just think that everything had just piled on, and you don't really deal with it. So I had that, and I had Brexit, and then Dan had this position in for a company based in Canada. I'm like, do you know what? let's just go for it. Not envisaging that in 9 months' time there'd be a global pandemic. So we packed up everything and we moved.
Yeah.
So we arrived in Canada on Canada Day, which is July the 1st, 2019. And got ourselves settled in. I found work quite quickly working in a jewelry store, a really lovely jewelry store in Oshawa, a family-run business, wonderful place. And Dan continued working where he worked previously, but within their office there. So there was a lot of decisions that went about with that final decision to move. And I don't think we weren't very honest with our family. We were like, oh yeah, we're going to go over and we're going to try it and we're going to see if we love it. Never once did we kind of say, we can't have children in England, so we're going to try in Canada. Like, we never even, and I feel bad about that now. Now I'm a little bit older and a little bit wiser, and I've got, I've hit that point in my 30s where I don't really care that much anymore, and I'll just say what I think. I do kind of regret not having those conversations before we left, but I think we were all just very closed up about what was happening, and we didn't know where it was going to go as such. But I have been absolutely floored by the difference in treatment that I've got in Canada.
Yeah, you're not just a number anymore. And I think in the UK you kind of turn into one because they're just trying to get you out the door as quickly as they can because they've got other patients. Yeah, I have heard not great things.
There's a lot of money, isn't there? There's a lot of money attached to fertility treatment. So if you've got an NHS doctor who works in the NHS but also has a private clinic, it's ka-ching for that person. They can make a lot of money. So if they don't think you're going to be successful, they're not really that interested in you, to be honest. That's kind of the impression I got. And that's not every doctor. And I don't want to tar them all with the same brush. But unfortunately, you only see the doctor in your region.
Yeah.
So if the doctor in your region doesn't believe that you're capable, then they're not going to invest time or effort. And so you're exactly right. I became a human being again because, yes, like my doctors here earn a lot of money. Like, that's a fact. But that releasing of the BMI cap all of a sudden just made me a human being again.
Yeah.
And the conversation, like, immediately. So in Canada, it's kind of half percentage private, like national health, and then the rest is either insurance or private kind of Medicare. So it's kind of a bit of both. So it's kind of a bridge between England and a bridge between America, I guess, is the way to put it. So we got our OHIP cards, and I saw my family doctor, and I told him straight away that I wanted to be referred for fertility treatment, and that happened straight away.
Wow.
Yeah, so straight away we saw a lovely doctor in Oshawa, and the ball started rolling, and I couldn't believe it. And it's like we did lots of tests, and it just felt like all of a sudden there was a possibility that this might happen for us. Like, okay. So we've had the 8 years of England where literally nothing had happened. And then we've been here 3.5 years now. And the process has been so quick and so efficient, and so human again. It's just been like a breath of fresh air. But underlying that is all the frustration that why couldn't the NHS do this for me? Because since I've been in Canada, I've been pregnant 3 times.
Wow.
So I can get pregnant. And I think the heartbreaking thing for me and my husband is that if we'd had the same treatment in England, we'd be parents by now. It'd have happened. But now in our late 30s, it's like time is running out for us. Oh, it feels like that
No,
because
I know what you, yeah,
yeah,
I get it. Like, well, I've spoken to a lot of women, and there really is a time, there really is a time factor and like an age factor. And I think, you know, going back to school and like, you know, the education system, they just don't say it anymore. They say, oh no, you've got time, you know, go for your career first. And they're really, it's not like that. It isn't,
no,
you know?
not. n- And I've so like I've been in a position now where I've had, you know, the IVF community and the baby loss community and the infertility community is just wonderful. Like it's wonderful in Canada, it's wonderful across the world.
Oh
But I've
yeah.
had a pool of friends in the UK, and I've had a pool of friends. I've got a few people that I know in Canada now, um, and it's funny like that. I've had friends who have had polycystic ovaries and been bigger girls and have been forced to lose weight. And some of my friends have managed it. They've managed to get below the threshold. They've managed to get treatment, but then they fluctuate. So they might lose their baby, and then they fluctuate their weight, and then the treatment's not available to them again. So that's the end of that, which is absolutely disgusting.
Yeah.
And then I also have other friends who have lost the weight, you know, had their miracle rainbow, um, and they're happy and they don't want to go for have another child. They don't want to do that. And I've had other friends who have been completely the opposite, who have had eating disorders, and the doctors have treated them like they're failures, or you can't have children because you've damaged yourself, and blah 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 blah. And there's such a stigma around the women's bodies that is never addressed. It's never addressed at school. It's never, you never sat down and told, look, there might be an occasion where you might not be able to conceive a child naturally. People don't talk about it. And
No.
then I think the fact that they don't talk about it within school and it's normalized makes it something very shameful. And then it becomes dangerous. And
Mhm.
I think that's kind of what's happened with the BMI kind of measurement in England. It's become a really dangerous platform for placing shame on women.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even know about it. I'm from the UK and I didn't know. And I think there's probably a lot of women who are watching right now who didn't know about the BMI thing. So now you know. And it's disgusting because
It's disgusting.
there's plenty of women who have babies and, you know, they can be, yeah, like we said, a lot over that BMI.
Yeah,
How they can
that and
say, oh
that's
no,
the
it's
truth.
dangerous. I don't know. And someone made that up anyway. Who made up BMI? It's like a load of baloney.
I know. It's like a draconian method from hundreds of years ago that when bodies were completely different and, you know, food source was completely different. And
Oh,
it's just crazy. And there'll be some wonderful man or woman sat watching this who's in the same position as me. And the biggest piece of advice that I could give them is advocate for yourself.
yeah,
Know that you can get pregnant. You can get pregnant. And they just need to work out the doses of meds for you. Like when we sat down with our, because we moved, we were referred quite quickly, probably more quickly than other people in Canada, because sometimes they want you to do around 5 IUIs. Not everyone, but that's kind of their guide. And we were very honest with our doctor. Um, she is she is honestly fantastic. And I said to her, you know, we've been trying for 11 years. At that point, it was about 9. We've been trying for 9 years. And the truth is that there's a male factor infertility here as well. And I feel like we're just throwing money down the drain. It's like $1,000 every time for an IUI. Couldn't we just conserve the money and use it for our IVF and we'll pay privately? And so she was very understanding, and she was like, so I'd explain the BMI to her, and she's like, I can't believe how poorly you've been treated in the UK. Because you've been trying so long, I'm going to make the referral for you, and we'll just bypass the IUIs and go straight for IVF, which is what happened. And we got referred to Markham Fertility Centre in Markham, Ontario. And I honestly, I've met so many angels. And what they said to me as well was that I am such a case study of polycystic ovaries. Like, literally, my follicles, my unmature follicles, are in there having a party. And my doctor was like, you are going to have no problem with your egg retrieval, none at all. They're going to take eggs out of you for fun. You're going to have so many follicles you don't know what to do with. Like, and he was right. He was right. Like, they, it didn't take much. It did not take much for us to get a good batch of eggs. Let's put it that way.
It's always funny to say, isn't it? A batch of eggs from me.
A batch of eggs, a cluster of follicle. I don't know,
That's
but like, yeah, it didn't take much. So yeah, I mean, it's been very tricky on one end, and then very kind of bountiful in another, in terms of the difference between the UK and Canada. And ultimately, I just would really want ladies to know that they have to really push their medical practitioners, and if they don't, I always knew that what they were saying to me was wrong, and I didn't act quick enough. And it's great in hindsight now to look back at it and go, I should have done this and I should have done that. But there are some people there who are, like I was, 24, 25, and are bigger ladies and are healthy, and all they need is just a little bit of something, like just a little bit of something that isn't available in the NHS.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I mean, look, don't blame yourself. Like, it's a hard thing. Like, obviously we have to take responsibility for our own actions, but at the same time, you were being told that you're too big, you're too big, you're too big. So obviously you'd focus on the weight loss, because that's what you're being told is the problem, and that's your first hurdle to jump over. So you were focused on that because that's what you were told to focus on. And I think it can make it really hard when you're sitting in front of a professional with a degree, who's sitting there and telling you, you're too big, go and lose weight and then you can be a mum. That's hard. Like, how are you supposed to not focus on weight when that's what you're being told? So I think give yourself credit, because, those things, I mean, it's tough for anyone to go through any kind of like sort of mental bullying, essentially.
And it was abuse. I felt like it was abuse. It was abuse. It was abuse of position as well, I think. And I can I can understand it's a very tricky profession to be in. You hold someone's life in your hands. I get that. I've been involved in a very tricky profession as well, where, there are certain caveats to your work that, you have to be very wary of. So it's not me kind of trying to throw anyone under the bus, but at the same time, it's like, this is a system that does not work. It does not facilitate the people within it, especially in this day and age. Like, it's a totally different society we live in than 200 years ago. So why are we still using the same methods then, and not providing people with the human right of being able to become parents? Like that's the truth of it for me.
Even down to like the actual care that someone needs, like getting to the actual like illness or the crux of the diagnosis, instead of just band-aiding it. I mean, the fact that you went on the pill, so many women have gone through the same thing as you. Like they had this weird thing, they weren't having periods, they weren't having something, and then they're like, oh, we'll just take the pill, here you go, that will fix it. you know, that they
Yeah.
still have periods. And
Yeah, you'll have periods.
it's like that didn't fix it, mate. It just made the problem
No,
worse for when I'm
just
like
mask
when
it.
I'm older.
Yeah. And if you have a doctor that says to you, come back when you want to have children, I would change your doctor as quickly as possible,
Oh yeah.
because there's too much made on polycystic ovarian syndrome just being about having children, and it isn't. It impacts your mental health, like depression, anxiety, um your feelings of self-worth, with the hair growth, the hair loss. Like, there's so many different caveats to polycystic ovaries that people really don't have a clue about, because isn't enough research. And I know there's a lot of research happening in the UK at the moment, because I'm always kind of notified of it. And there's some great charities as well, like Verity, that's if people have polycystic ovaries, they have so many resources available to people that they can tap into and use. And there's a lovely man that I follow who's based in Australia. I think it's Healthy PCOS. He does some fantastic supplements as well, like
I'll
that
link them
can
below
really help.
for people so that they can have a look at those things that you've mentioned.
Definitely.
But yeah, no, it's there are some really great resources, especially for polycystic ovarian. I've actually seen quite a few myself, like women posting about it and actually going in depth into like what you should have like in your diet to help you manage symptoms and all of that. And it really is something that is sort of life uh, illness thing that you actually have to deal with all the time. And you're right, they place a focus on fertility rather than no, this is like life. Like you have to,
Yeah.
have a new lifestyle to accommodate and make life livable, because otherwise you're going to be in discomfort.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And there's a lot of links to a lot of other things that you do have to be aware of. And I think as research grows and we learn more about this condition, we're going to find more hereditary kind of links as well, which it's important that people get the assistance that they need that isn't just involved in fertility. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So with your losses, because you said you did actually get pregnant 3 times, and that was all
Yeah.
in Canada.
Yeah.
Um, how did that play out? Like what happened?
So we did our first egg retrieval on Valentine's Day last year. And we ended up, after the fertilization and kind of the dividing of the blasts and whatever, we ended up with eight embryos, which is fantastic. And so we did the first transfer around about Easter time, and that was a chemical pregnancy. So it was a very quick positive, which was the best feeling in the world. Like, we'd been waiting for a positive pregnancy test for 11 years. So to see that, it was just magical. So we've always tested. So we always started testing around day 8. I know some people are like, no, don't test, but for us, it's like we wanted to know. We didn't want any surprises, so we started testing at day 8, and it got to a point around about day 11, day 12, where we noticed that it was starting to fade. So we went in for our serum test, just to kind of get a confirmed pregnancy test, and we weren't pregnant. So very quick positive to negative, and it was heartbreaking, but I think it just galvanized us into being like, we called our chemical pregnancy hope. We're like, right, okay, so there's hope that it's going to happen. And so we took a little bit of a break, and then we transferred again in August, beginning of August. And again, we started testing. What was nice this time, funny story. So first transfer, our doctor didn't transfer. The head of the clinic transferred because they can't guarantee who's going to be in there, and so it was a very quick, like, we would lay down, and like, oh, my poor husband, he didn't know what to do at all, and he didn't direct him, and he was just like, oh gosh, I could just remember he was just stood there, and he said to me afterwards, he said, I felt like a naughty schoolboy. I felt like the head teacher had sat me outside her office, and I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know where to go, and oh gosh, I felt so sorry for him. And afterwards we went outside, and the nurse said to me, she was like, oh, is your husband nervous? I was like, yeah, he's a little bit nervous, but it's only because of what we've been through. She went, he's going to be a great dad. And I was like, I know he is. She said, but watch out for the birds. Because if he's that nervous for that, he's going to be really nervous for the birth. But anyway, the second transfer was done by our doctor, Dr. Weiss. I can't say enough about that woman. She is an angel to me. She will always be an angel to me. And it's very strange because she has this very, like, weird resemblance to one of our best friends, so it feels like I'm being treated by my best friend. So, which is nice. But so that time they were a little bit more gentle, and it wasn't as quick, and Dan sat next to me and felt a little bit part of it rather than stuck in the corner, which was very odd. I felt horrible, because Dan's so involved. Like Dan comes to every single appointment with me. Even during COVID, where he wasn't allowed out of the car, he would drive me to the clinic, which was an hour away, and he'd wait in the car, and then he'd drive me home, and he'd go to everything. Even if it was just a blood test, he'd drive me. He's very involved, and he loves being part of it, even if it's just a small part at those points. So for him to get involved in that, it was really cool for him to be able to see kind of the transfer and stuff like that. And we started testing at day 6, and it was positive, and it was getting darker and darker. And we're like, oh, okay. So we went to the clinic, and we got a positive pregnancy test. We were over the moon, really good numbers. So naturally, you're like, oh, we need to tell everyone. Let's tell everybody. We'll tell the world. We didn't tell the world, but we did call parents. So obviously we were in Canada. So we called parents. I called my mum and my sister. They'd been waiting for ages. So it was 5 hours difference, and I was on my break, and my break was around about 4 o'clock. So it's 9 p.m. in England. And I was kind of like, they were waiting for me. So I called them, told them that we were pregnant. They were all over the moon. It was super exciting. And then I went back to work. And then at around about 9 p.m, the store closed. And I needed to go to the washroom. So I went to the washroom. And that was when I saw blood. And I was like, oh my God. So literally within like 12 hours, it was over. So like you do, you think, oh, maybe it's just a little bit of spotting and it'll be fine. And got in touch with the nurses, and they were like, let's just see how we go. So we went back on the Wednesday, and my levels had gone right down. So we kind of knew that end game on that one. And so we called that little one Faith, because, even though it's so very short lived, every loss of ours and every loss of everyone's is loved. It doesn't matter, like, because even if you don't carry them for a while, you that want and that longing to have a child, it still brings so much love.
And it was still an embryo, like,
yeah, it's still mine and Dan together. Yeah, that's it. And like, there's so many weird kind of stigmas around baby loss and people not wanting to talk about it. And I find that I find it incredibly strange, and I find it incredibly hard for people to not put weight into baby loss, regardless of how long you've carried.
Yeah.
Because the hopes and the dreams are still there. The wants and the longings and the plans, and they change your life,
They do.
like with each loss. And I just find it incredibly difficult that some people just brush it away like it's nothing. Well, oh well, you can try again. I know, but yeah, I can try again, but it's, still a loss, still valid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and
that was
also they forget as well, like they're individuals. You can't like have the same one again. Like
no, that's it, isn't it? You
that
can't have the
specific
same one.
mix of genes is not going to exist again. So I can't actually have that one. So that's
No, and
it.
that's it. Yeah. Me and Dan kind of say those kind of comments as well. It's very easy to sit on a position of privilege, as someone who, maybe, because I know a lot of people that have had baby loss and they've been like, well, it's okay, you can try again. But they have their children, and they've stopped that process now. So it's very easy for people to be like, oh, well, you can try again. And I went through this, and I have a friend who went through that. Yeah, I understand that, but you're not living in it anymore. So it kind of invalidates the experience. It's like, well, I did that too. Well, that's fair enough. But ultimately, at this point, I don't know if I'm going to end up with a child at the end of this process. So to dismiss is a very tough pill for me to swallow, because that loss, for however long I was carrying, and that mixture of genetics and this miracle of that embryo being fertilized, might be the only opportunity we get to be parents,
Yeah.
which is, it's very humbling to say that. But there are plenty of people haven't who have gone through this process and have not ended up with a child at the end of it, and it's just tragic, really. So to invalidate those kind of losses with, oh well, it was only a few days, and but
Yeah, and you're right. It's easier when you're on the other side and you've got that contentment and you've got that, I mean, I've spoken to women who, they tried, and it just didn't happen. And so they adopted
yeah,
because they'd had enough. They'd had
yeah,
enough. And now they're on the other side, and they're feeling more content, and and they've got that contentment, they've got that peace because they did all they could, and then they went for a different option. And I think, yeah,
yeah.
like you don't always get what you want, and it
No,
sucks,
that's the truth of it, isn't it?
but
Yeah,
we
you
can't,
don't.
yeah, we can't invalidate the experience that we go through, and that's all we have. Like, we're humans, like
Yeah,
all we have is our experience. So,
exactly. Yeah, and it's very sobering thought, like, um because really, like, we're in the age of Instagram, aren't we, where people only see what they want to see, and you only share, a lot of people, the good stuff that's going on. So I just decided, I was like, it's about time, like, I kind of shared with people what we've kind of been through, because ultimately people think, oh, Emma and Dan, they moved to Canada, they're having such a great time in Canada. And Canada's a really lovely place to live, don't get me wrong. um but in an ideal world, I would have stayed in my home. I was a homeowner. I sold my house to fund my IVF in Canada. We sold our cars. I gave up my career. Um, my husband works a job that probably isn't his ideal job, but it brings in really good money. And we've spent in an excess of almost, I think it's over £60,000.
oh,
And so it's like, but people don't see that. Like, they don't, they see the tip of the iceberg, and they see that journey that we want to present, but they don't see what's going on underneath. Like, and so I'm at the point now where I'm like, people need to know. Like, people need to know the struggle that we go through as a community, and even people, everyone's story is different. Like, and so my story is significantly different to somebody else's story down the road. And my landlords went for IVF, and they didn't end up with a child at the end of it. and you know, their stories is considerably different to us, but I just think that people need to know. Like they just need to know,
Yeah.
and it normalizes it a little bit more, and then maybe I hope that we might have some kind of shift in the education where actually, people talk about infertility in the classroom, and a child kind of understands that you're not a failure if you can't conceive naturally. It's there's so many shifts that need to happen to make life a, a happier place for us, I think.
Yeah. And I think even like making it a note to tell kids about the age, like an age thing, like so that they have that understanding that no, you can't just like go for your career and and then I expect to have no problems. Like that's because there's a lot of women who I've spoken to who didn't really have problems with their periods or anything like that, but they waited and waited and waited and waited because they were told, yeah, you won't have any problem, you can have a baby later. And now they're having a lot of problems, and I think it's just changing the narrative so that kids know. Because like when you're young, you need to know this stuff. Like, how are you supposed to make any plans or
Did you ever know about egg reserves? I had no idea.
Yeah,
I know that. I had no clue.
Well, doing this event, like someone told me like 28 is like, once you reach that age, like that's when things, aren't as great with your eggs. And I'm like, what? 28? I thought it was like,
Nobody told me that.
What are you talking
We're
about?
all getting older. We're all having children. Well, I say that loosely because, I mean, not always the case, but a lot of us are having children a lot older now.
Oh, yeah.
So we don't understand. Like, it's just, it's.
And the problems have gone up. Like the cases of like miscarriage and stillborn and all of these things have gone up, and they're going up and up and up and up and up every year.
I think Renee, who you spoke to a few days back, the baby plan, she has some really interesting data that she released today about kind of it's not 1 in 8 anymore, it's 1 in 5, and if you're under a certain set of circumstances, it becomes 1 in 4, and sperm counts are decreasing all of the time. And I'd have to go into a bit more detail about why, but I think a lot of that is environmental reasons and things like that.
Diet, and what they're putting in the food, what they're putting in products. It's actually like a massive rabbit hole once you like start delving in there.
It can be dangerous. So beware. But I mean, it is like fertility is in a decline, and so there's going to be more people that don't have the necessarily tools and resources that they need to combat something that is so heartbreaking and can be very like soul destroying, really. But yeah, I mean that's where we're at, aren't we? Really?
It just I think like I look, I had kids young. I had 3 kids in my early 20s, and as soon as I sort of reached 29, we got pregnant, and that's when I had my first loss. And I had 2 losses last year, so that was a massive wake-up call, because I was like, you do the thing, you have babies, and then this whole world got opened up to me, and I was like, this is insane. What is going on? Like, who are all these people? What?
And it just shows you, though, doesn't it? Like how, like you can conceive quite easily when you're younger. You never really know, like as life, you go on life's path, and how these things can open up to you, and and they change your life hugely.
They do. And I mean, honestly, there's so many amazing women. I'm like, I just want you to be a mom. You'd be amazing. Like, it just hurts. Like, I wish you could all have your rainbows, and like, I wish you could all just have like living children that, and I just
wish we could get to a stage where necessary precautions could maybe take place a little bit sooner. the testing could be more open to people. I mean, we I've talked about our 2 initial transfers that were very, very early losses.
Yeah, what was the last one? Because you said
we decided not to tell anybody that we were going to transfer. It just felt like too much pressure after the last time, and losing the baby so quickly after telling everybody that we were pregnant. And we're like, oh, do you know what? Let's just do it on our own. So we transferred our 3rd embryo, and we got pregnant. And it was like, okay, right. And then we got pregnant, and then the next test came and we were still pregnant, and then we were pregnant, and then we had our scan and we were still pregnant. And it's like, oh, okay, this is a bit weird now. So we're actually getting a yes. Oh my gosh. So we did our, I think it was 9 or 10 week scan through the fertility clinic, and there they were, this little avocado looking bean, and it was amazing, and the heartbeat was there, the heartbeat was good. So it's like, oh my gosh, I might actually be a mum. Okay. So we did tell people, we told our parents and we told our best friends, and that was it. We didn't tell anybody else. Let it happen. Got to the 12-week scan, fine, everything was great. Baby was super active. They had a personality like so quickly, like straight away. I couldn't believe. I'd always wanted to experience being pregnant, and I loved it. I loved every second of it. She was very active. She had big long legs, and she liked to kick, and she liked music. I mean, I knew there was going to be a bit of a problem when we were in the scan for the 12-week one, and she was dancing to Shawn Mendes, and I was like, your dad's not going to go with that, so we're going to have to change your music taste quite quickly. But yeah, very active. 12 weeks were great. Did the 16-week scan. Was it? No, sorry. We ended up having 3 scans. So we did a 10-week, a 6-week, a 10-week, and a 12-week. And then we went in for a 16-week checkup. So everything was fine on the scans, no problem. 16-week checkup. You know that feeling you sit on the doctor's like bed, and it's like, oh, it's only going to be a quick one. You're going to come in for your blood pressure, and you're going to come in for this. And it's like, right. So did my weight, did my blood pressure, and then she brought out those little Dopplers and that little handheld thing, and you're like, oh, this is going to turn quickly. So she's trying to find the heartbeat, and there's no, she can't find. Well, you can hear it in the background, but it's kind of very brief, and then the baby turns. So I knew the baby was moving. So we got rushed for an emergency ultrasound, and rather than let us wait 2.5 hours, which it was going to be, they were like, the surgery's open, but we don't want you to freak out. We're not taking you in there because there's a problem. It's the only place that's free. So we went in. Baby was fine. Like, honestly, the biggest sigh of relief I've ever had in my life. And then so this was the Wednesday, and then on the Saturday, I started to feel like a little bit off, like just a little bit under the weather, but all pregnancy symptoms were fine and whatever. So just tried to look after myself, drink a little bit more water, kind of rest a bit more. But I still felt off through the week. And then on the Wednesday night, I went to bed early. I went to bed at around about 8:30. I was just kind of lay there, and I kind of knew something wasn't right. And about 9 o'clock, I kind of went and I wiped, and I could see this pink mucus. And I was like, oh, okay. So like you do, you go on Google, Mr. Google, type it in, and it's like, oh, sometimes at 17 and a half weeks, you might see some of this, it's fine. So it's like, right, okay, don't worry, just go back to bed. So I went back to bed, and then within 15 minutes, I felt blood, and I knew it was blood. So I went to the washroom, and it was very light pink, but I was like, I'm not taking any chances. So called Dan. We rushed to the hospital, our local hospital. We were in there within 15 minutes. And God love the doctor. he was as green as they came, and he wasn't very experienced, and they were obviously very busy that night. So he did an ultrasound at the bedside, and the baby's heart was good, and she was moving, and all right, everything was fine in that respect. But he did a speculum examination and then vanished, and then came back around about 45 minutes later, and he was like, I can see something blue green, and I'm not quite sure what it is. So I'm going to refer you to the bigger hospital in Oshawa, which is about 20 minutes away. So we drove to Oshawa, kind of knowing kind of what was going to happen. We got there. He'd said, like, you'll be fast tracked, you'll be seen by the doctor quite quickly. So we got there, and they put us in a private room, which was very nice of them. And then it was about 1:30 at this point in the morning, and we waited and we waited and we waited, and nobody came. We kept asking where the gynecologist was, and it was, oh, she's upstairs, she's dealing with something, she'll be down soon. And then it got to like about 4:30, and my waters just broke. So like at that point it was like, right, well, I knew what it was straight away. Because you watch like Call the Midwife and ER and like other hospitals, and you know, so I was like, right, okay, that's it then, isn't it? And then the doctor appeared within 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes, she was there, and I was furious, not gonna lie. And so she did the test to see if it was amniotic fluid, came back it was. And then we had to wait for an ultrasound. The ultrasound department wasn't open. So from like 5:30 till 9, we waited for the ultrasound. And obviously we're on our own. It's me and Dan, we have a few friends, but Dan had to go. We had to go and sort the dog. So he went and got some stuff, sorted the dog. Bless him. Honestly, everyone like high fives the women, but when you've got a good man who like is so supportive, he went and he called everybody. I don't know how he did it, because I was just like autopilot, like numb, couldn't function at all. But he called all of our parents, he called our best friends. He drove home, got all of the stuff, sorted out the dog, drove back. He went somewhere else as well. He had to go somewhere and pick something up. And then came back, and then we went up to the ultrasound, and they wouldn't let him into the ultrasound. They made him sit outside. And I was like, why can't he just come in? Like, we're obviously going to get bad news. I want him to come. And the woman was like, it's policy. The man has to wait outside. He's not allowed in the room. Wow. So I got into the room, and the woman doing the ultrasound, the nurse, was lovely, actually. She was great. And so I said to her, can I take photos? And she was like, yeah, of course you can take photos. I think, can my husband come in? And she was like, yeah, let me just take like my readings, and then I'll get him to come in. So normally what they do in Canada is they'll kind of like do it and then let the partner look at photos or videos. But she didn't, actually, which I was really grateful for. So I went and got, like, she had to do a little bit of one internally, but not right in. And then I went and got changed, and then came back in, and she brought Dan in, and she was like, do you want to do the ultrasound live? Because the baby was still alive. So she got me back on the bed, and she let Dan see her. Which I thought was just very, very kind of her, because he's so involved. And I think in that moment, he just felt like it was insignificant to the process. And I think what we found, although fertility treatment is much better here and we're treated really humanely and well looked after, and we're not a number anymore from this experience, there's certain points where the man is made to feel very insignificant. he was only entitled to 3 days bereavement leave. His bereavement leave was over before he even got out of the hospital.
Yeah.
And so then he had to use his holiday, had to use his personal emergency leave. You know, our baby may have, and I say this because a lot of people do think it may have only been 17 and a half weeks, but that baby was 11 years of sacrifice and love. And I think when people are dealing with baby loss as well, I think they should also think about the individuals involved. And I do feel like Dan wasn't given that care and compassion. But that lady did. She was wonderful. And like I talked about the baby having personality, like she point blank would not ever play ball in a scan. Not interested. She wanted to show her back. She wanted to show her bum. She wanted to show everything. She would never go profile. She would never. You'd have to really have to coax her. But that time, like that last time we saw her in my belly, she turned a full face to the camera. Like she just turned it full face. We saw her complete face. And I thought to myself, she knows. She knows. So we did the ultrasound and then they took us back to the private room. And we'd had another gynecologist come in and just talk us through what was going to happen. And we were going to go to the birthing suite. So they told us that there was nobody in the birthing suite. Nobody was in. So we were going to be completely alone. We were going to be put in a really nice suite at the back. And we would be well looked after. So the lovely emergency nurse, Courtney, her name was, she was wonderful. The porter came and she's like, no, I'm taking them. So she wheeled us all the way up to the birthing suite, bless her. Really lovely lady. And then we were in the birthing suite and like I can't say enough about the nurses and the doctors. I just can't. Like we had a really wonderful nurse, Ashley. We had Sarah and Ashley at first. And they just took care of us and nothing was too much, and they shared a lot of personal stories with us, and which at the time really comforted us. We felt like a real connection. And then I think we transferred there about midday, and then by 6 o'clock we'd made the decision to start the labour. So we had to take, I can't even remember the names of them, but the pills that you put in your little cheeks, like chalky. And then made the decision that I didn't want any morphine or anything like that because I wanted to be present and stuff like that. So she came very quickly. So 9 o'clock, they came back in to start the next course, and they gave me that, and then she was there before they'd even dissolved. She'd arrived. It was so like, I just think it takes a very special kind of person to look after someone who's going through that much trauma and know what to do and what to say, and like to be compassionate, not just with me, but with Dan. Like, and Dan always had this kind of fear that he wouldn't be a good dad, which was ridiculous because as soon as she arrived, his paternal instinct kicked in and she was there in his arms, and it was wonderful. And I don't know about other women, but there's always that question about if you want to try again. And obviously you're in the throes of trauma. It's like, no one never wants to feel like this again. But then when you look at him and you see him with your child, and you're just like, I couldn't go for the rest of my life not seeing my husband in that position again. It was just so natural. And like, they couldn't get the placenta out of me. It just wouldn't come out. And the doctor tried everything. And so I knew I was going to go for a D&C, but they were trying to get it out. And Dan had Avery, which is the name of our little girl, in one arm and the sick bucket in the other. And it like totally like multitasking. Like, yeah, it was just wonderful. It was wonderful. And they gave us so much time. Like we could spend as long as we wanted with her. So she arrived at 9:35, and I had my D&C at around about 1:30, and then we stayed at the hospital with her, and we FaceTime parents and asked if they wanted to meet her, and they all did. So we did that. And she looked very much like us. It was very strange. She had my nose and my lips, and Dan's body. It's just so very strange. She was so perfect. And we read to her, and we danced with her, and we sung with her, and created like memories. And it was never like, oh, you need to go somewhere.
That's really nice.
It was, yeah, and I'm reading a book at the minute, and it's called Beyond Grief by an author called Pippa Vosper. She does a lot of journalistic work for Vogue. She had a very similar experience to me with an incompetent cervix. But as I'm reading this, and I'm reading other women's experiences, and like the way nurses treated them, I'm like, I was so blessed that I got a group of angels, because I don't know if I could have handled those 12, 24, 48 hours without them and their compassion. And they're a unique set of people, because the way they care has been brought on by one of the nurses' losses. She lost a little boy. So she and the rest of the team have restructured how they look after people who are going through baby loss. But to hear some of the harrowing stories that other women and men have gone through, it's tragic.
The hospital stuff is so painful when women tell me about what they've gone through and how they were treated. Like, it's like I lost mine naturally at home, and although there's trauma in that, I did it right in front of me. There's just so many more layers through hospital traumas, and I'm so glad that you had such a nice team.
Yeah, I was really blessed. I was. And when I read Pippa Vosper's book, she delivered her son at home. Same situation, a little bit further into the pregnancy than I was by 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I just, it must be like, because I've had a good experience, so I can't draw upon that negative. But for me, it just felt like how heart-wrenching it would be to deliver at home and have that being a memory in your home. And I can't imagine what that's like for you and other women that have been through that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's just memories, you like, some of it I've moved past, like it's not as bad, but then like, obviously, like, I bled a lot in my bathroom. I saw the sack thing that I delivered in the bathroom, so there's a lot of memories and stuff attached to it. But it's, I mean, I suppose it's probably slightly easier for me because I didn't give birth to a baby. I gave birth to a sack. So, but it does suck. Really sucks.
Yeah, it really sucks.
Sack.
It's still a baby.
Yeah, I know. And that's what's hard for me, because I said to my husband, I was like, I don't have a baby to hold. Like, it's a sack. Like, what is that? It looks like an alien egg. Like, it's horrible. But yeah, I mean, that experience that you had in the hospital is, yeah, I'm so glad that you had such a good team.
Me too. And like, you said earlier about like 6 degrees of separation. Really strange thing. So it was my birthday, so we lost Avery. Avery arrived on the Thursday night, and it was my birthday on the Tuesday, and my friends came for dinner, and we were sat at the table eating, and trying to make the best of a awful situation. And I was talking about the nurses, and talking about all of these amazing angels that showed up for us, like wonderful people. And he was like, what's her name? And I told him the nurse's name, and he's like, oh, that's my ex-girlfriend. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, that's my ex-girlfriend. So like, he messaged her on Facebook, not spoke to her for years. He like messaged her on Facebook and just to say thank you for looking after us. And it was his ex-girlfriend. And it's just like, the world is such a small place. But I genuinely, as I get older, people probably will laugh at me, but I just feel like people are sent into your life to be, to do something or to help in some way or support. And I just feel like she was sent, to be honest. And there was loads of little coincidences within those things, like those events that happened. And I think it does, I try and find some solace in it. I try and find some, joy in the loss and the grief and what we're feeling. And I really wanted to be a mum, and I am a mum, and I'll always be a mum. And we were talking. We went over to England and we scattered our ashes in some of our special places, and we did it with family. And it just, I said to my husband, I was like, we've got the perfect child. Like, we're never going to be mad at her. We're never going to be angry at her. She's perfect. She gave us so much joy in the 18 weeks that we had her. And like, so much personality, so there's memories there to be had and to be cherished. And it's not easy. It's really bloody difficult. And you find layers and layers of trauma that you've never addressed. Like, I'm really struggling at the minute. I'm very angry about what happened to me in the UK at the moment. And it just makes you realize that you've just not, because you are so wrapped up in that cycle of trying to get pregnant, taking the drugs, having a transfer, getting pregnant, loss, starting again, doing the same thing again. You just never like process it or deal with it, or just on to the next one, which is really cold.
Yeah.
But now, because I've got a break, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, there's so much anger and hurt and grief. Maybe she was sent to tell me that I need to process it, that I need to look after myself. And it's just trying to find, I don't know, meaning behind the loss, really.
Yeah, I mean, you've been through so much, and a lot of the time, from what I've experienced talking to different women, like, until you break from the cycle, it's you won't get the time.
No.
You won't get
Yeah.
the time. And
And
that's okay if that's the way it needs to be for you.
That's it. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? And what people don't realize is everybody's time frame is different. Everybody's circumstances are different. We want to move back to the UK. We know that, how's a way to put it? We have 5 embryos that are in the freezer, and we know that at the end of, it might not even be the end of those 5 embryos, we're going home. And I know that England won't treat me. So when I go home, our journey is over, which is awful to think about it, but it's the truth. And really, after 11 years, how much longer do you want to put your body through this? It goes through my mind so often, the amount of drugs that we pumped into my body to try and make this happen. What am I going to look like in 10, 15 years? What's my health going to look like? There's so many like different things to think about.
Definitely. And I mean, I think for yourself, you do have that very finite, once we move back, that's, it's done. We're done. And you're right, like, it's not a giving up. It's choosing a different path. It's
Yeah, it's
choosing a
readjusting,
different
isn't it?
reality,
And like,
because you can
yeah,
live, in this, cycled, waiting for each cycle life forever
yeah,
if you really want to. I mean,
yeah, you could go for it.
yeah, they've even got research to show that you could, even if you've been through menopause, you can still, if your womb's all good.
I was admiring Hilary Swank, who at 50 years old is having twins. I couldn't believe that the other
Yeah.
day. It was incredible.
Oh,
So we could keep going, couldn't we?
yeah, you could go forever, but there's something to be said about, our mental health, our physical health, and
Hmm.
understanding when enough's enough for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And being okay with that and coming to terms with it and saying, I think that was the thing with us when we decided to move to Canada. It was like we wanted to be able to say that we had done everything we could,
Yeah.
and then we could have some closure at the end of it, which, as hard as it's going to be to say enough's enough, at least we've always got that.
Yeah.
We tried our best, and yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, have they said anything about what caused the um
Yeah, yeah, they have. To be honest, this is how amazing our doctor is, and I know you probably spoke to a lot of people that are clients at Markham. I know there's quite a few that follow you, but Dr. Weiss took a lot of time with us. We spoke about what had happened because normally, so I had an incompetent cervix. The truth was that Avery was too heavy and my cervix opened. Um, which is what he saw when he looked up with the speculum, the first initial doctor, that blue green was what he saw. But normally you might feel contractions or something like that to indicate, and I hadn't. So we were talking through that really. Um, and our feel was like Dan needed a little bit more time to decide if he wanted to try again. Me, initially, I was like, no, absolutely not. And then I went for a walk, and the song that we sung to Avery came on shuffle. And there was this little bird that was following me around my entire walk, all the way around. I was kind of like, that's a sign. That's a sign. And then from that point, it was very much for me, yes, I want to try again. However, I only want to try again if it's not going to be a stab in the dark kind of thing and there's going to be something that we can do to stop it happening.
yeah.
So I'm really lucky because we just graduated from the fertility clinic and we were moving to our obgyn on the Monday after Avery was born.
Yeah.
And in some strange twist of fate, the doctor who was going to be our obgyn was actually on call the night we delivered Avery. So she was there with us,
Oh
which is
wow.
another very weird set of circumstances. So
Yeah.
she's kind of taken us under her wing as well, and
Oh wow.
she runs a specialist program for high risk pregnancies. So the idea is that it might not necessarily happen again, but the likelihood is it will because you've got an incompetent cervix. It might have been a medical procedure that's made that, a little bit not as tight as it should be. So they're going to do a stitch at 12 weeks. So
Yeah.
they'll stitch my cervix.
Yeah.
And like one of my friends was like, oh my gosh. And I was like, did you watch Downton Abbey? And she was like, yeah, yeah. I said, that's how Anna carried her baby. And she's like, oh, I didn't realize that. I was like, yeah, yeah. So it's been done for years. So
No,
it's
I know. Yeah,
very,
I've heard of it. I've heard of it. My mum, she said, when she was in the hospital after having, I think it was either me or my sister, she was placed next to a woman who had lost a lot of babies, and they had sewn her up, were having her on strict bed rest, like she wasn't allowed to get up. Yeah, but it was in the U. It was in the UK again, and she was placed on a ward full of women with babies, and she'd never had one. And I think that's really awful, and that's a really quite
very
disgusting
strange
thing
way of
that
practice, don't they?
that England seemed to do. It was really
It's
quite,
very cold.
Yeah, it's just awful. Like, why would you do that? Like, you know, the woman's not had any kids. You know, she's going through a rough time. You know, she wants them, and you're gonna place her on a ward full of children. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah. No, yeah. And you know what? Like, they do it here as well. It's not so prevalent. Like, you go into a doctor's surgery and you've got your fertility patients up to a certain point, and then the pregnant mothers come in. So you
Yeah,
sat around with a load of pregnant mothers, which is really hard depending on where you're at mentally.
yeah,
Um, and the same again. I was with a friend who had to have a D&C, and we at very early stage pregnancy loss, and I went with her to hold her hand. Um, and you're in there with all these mothers, like all these pregnant people, and you're like, oh gosh, that's hard. That's so hard for any person to go through. It's like that whole, well, this is what you could have had. It's almost like taunting, and that's where I know I know they don't mean it. It's just they don't think like, they've not logically thought about, maybe we should have a different waiting room. Maybe we should, have a gap between the pregnant mothers arriving and the infertility patients leaving. And
yeah.
there's things that can be done. It's just they don't want to.
I mean, I think having a separate waiting room might be nice. Like, and actually, like, so when you go in there, all the women in there are in your shoes. Like, they're in
Yeah,
the same position as you. They're going through the same thing as you. So they may
yeah,
have a big belly, but it doesn't mean it means they're still going through exactly what you're going through.
yeah,
And I
exactly.
think
And
that there's like a little bit of just comfort in that. But yeah, it's it's pretty horrible. The whole
it
situation's
is horrible. It's
but
horrible that we have to go through this, but talking to you and sharing stories and sharing experiences is so valid. It's so important for people to know that they're not alone. And I've had many other people over the years, I mean, come to me and ask for advice, and the usual, oh, you're so strong, you're so inspirational, blah 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 blah. And I really appreciate it. I do appreciate it, but sometimes it's just, you know, I do it because there's got to be someone else on my friends list who is going through this and doesn't feel able to share for whatever reason, which is completely valid. But at least they know that I'm open and I can talk about it, and I like to talk about it.
yeah.
It's just providing a safe space for people, really, more than anything.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for speaking with me and sharing your story
Thank
and
you.
giving me so much of your time because I just realized
Yeah.
we've been talking for a while.
Obviously, two chatterboxes, aren't we?
Oh, well, it's an English thing, isn't it? Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm so sorry that's been your journey. That is there's just so much, and I know you don't feel strong all the time,
No,
and maybe you
fine.
don't feel strong today, but you are strong. The fact that you're
Yeah.
still here, the fact that you're still going, the fact that you're still doing these things, and they are hard things, and you're still
Yeah.
going.
Yeah.
That is strength. That
It
is
is strength, isn't it?
mm,
And that's one thing that you can take away. You're surrounding yourself with people that are strong. Yeah. And yeah, I really enjoyed chatting to you. So thank you. Really means a lot to me. I've wanted to share my story for a long time. So
well, I am going to pray for a baby in your arms. I'm going to pray that everything that is happening at the moment is going to work and they're going to work out how to help you and that the stitch will work. I don't know. Um,
yeah, let's hope.
Hey, it's
Fingers
worked for
crossed.
other women, so I just heard a lady the other day say that she used a turkey baster to get pregnant, and she actually had a
Oh,
baby.
that's impressive. That is
Yeah,
impressive.
like, I
Wow.
mean, she said it was a medical grade turkey baster, but she still said like it's that whole like we just put it,
Oh,
because they were
wow.
like RUI is so expensive, so we just did it ourselves. And I was like,
That is
okay,
incredible. Do you know what though? You got to do what you got to do. Not everyone has that unlimited supply of money, and it worked. Good
yeah.
on her.
Yeah.
Good on him.
But yeah, like, thank you. And yeah, I'm definitely gonna be praying for you. I pray for so many women now, but
I know you've got a long list. You'll be there a while.
I'm gonna start writing it all down. But I'm definitely praying for you.
Oh, thank you, Ella. Honestly, it's been lovely chatting, and hopefully we'll have a nice update for you in the near future. Fingers crossed.
I hope so. And we can have another chat. Hopefully.
Yeah, that would be lovely.
Be another 2 hours.
Anytime. Oh no, it's fine. I love chatting anyway. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Again, it's English. But yeah, thank you. And yeah, just I'll be praying.
Thanks, hon.
Keep me updated.
Have a good day. Evening.
Day. It's my morning. It's like 7 a.m. 7 a.m.
Well, enjoy your day.
Thank you very much. Enjoy your
care.
night. Is it night?
Thanks. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Please note that all speakers, including experts and professionals, express information, views, and opinions that should not be used to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any medical conditions. If you have a medical issue, please consult a qualified professional. Speakers voice their own views, opinions, and conclusions, and they may not reflect the views, opinions, and conclusions of other speakers. Ella Rose, The Joy of Sunflowers, and its sponsors may not endorse all or any of the views, opinions, or conclusions expressed.